Thanks for being here, guys, girls, and everybody that is going to be watching this. We kind of got a new format where it's a smaller group of people and hopefully a really great conversation. But yeah, my name is Scott. I'm with the Climbing Business Journal, and you know what we do and what we're about. We empower the professionals that work in the climbing space. And in particular, we got a real soft spot for the route setters. Our founder was level five route setter when he started this in 2013. I was a comp setter in the 90s and early 2000s, and you know, route setting runs deep. It's really something that's important to us. And so I'm excited and just really privileged to work with Vortex Routesetting. Foxman and Justin, I met them a few years ago when they were presenting some of their data at the CWA Summit, which is one of the really amazing things that they do. All volunteer. They've been collecting data on the workplace and issues about route setting for years. You can find it at vortexroutesetting.com for free. A lot of that stuff they put out for free. And they're both also big contributors to the community. They sit on their CWA route setting committee and the work at height committee. And also they've both managed multi-location crews, so they know kind of know what it's like to have a lot of things going on, not just route setting, but managing route setting, multiple facilities. It's just an honor to work with them. So, yeah, without further ado, I'll pass it off to Foxman and Justin. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott. Um, we also have a couple other people in the room that we should do an introduction to. The expert that we brought in to talk about para is Nohl Haeckel. He's been setting for over 17 years, both commercial and competition. Has recently been doing quite a lot of para events. And so we thought, hey, who do we want to bring on to talk about this? Nohl, you are the perfect person. So thanks for being here. And then we also have Cameron here. Cameron, you want to give us like a little bit of who you are and where you are?
My name is Cameron. I'm a setter in Arizona. I've worked for a couple different locations for different gyms, like a fitness chain gym, Lifetime Fitness, and then a chain gym, Alta in Arizona as well. Um, I little bit familiar with paraclimbing. I'm constantly training with an IFSC paraclimber right now. I think he's in the RP1 category, so it's like the reach limitation one. I'm just looking to kind of stay fresh and learn as much to help training him and keep my route setting as fresh as possible.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you both so much for joining us. I usually give a little like speechy speech at the start of these because a lot of times we address like some like big fundamental like challenges that face route setters in the industry. And this is kind of a fun topic because I don't feel like I have to give the whole like, don't get too depressed. We'll have a beer about it and complain when I'm in your city. Like I feel like this is like a much more like inherently productive conversation where it's uh we're talking with experts on how we can keep growing a particular facet of the industry, uh, and not just being like, man, my body hurts. So I don't really have a whole list of problems that we need to address. I'm just psyched to learn more from you, Noel. Hooray.
Great. Great.
I kind of want to dive into like maybe one of the first questions. And Noel, if you want to take I think I hear two terms. I hear adaptive climbing and I hear paraclimbing. Uh, what is the difference, or are they the same?
I believe that they're the same. And my understanding is the difference is adaptive is used in like a sporting context, and para would be used as in a competition context. And that's the only real difference that I know of. So, or that's been explained to me.
Cool.
Yeah.
We can maybe dive in because I think the world we want to talk about is the para side. We can touch on adaptive too, but I kind of want to hone in on the para side. Um,
Great.
for anyone who's like listening in who might not be as familiar with what para is or how it works, like maybe we could start by explaining those categories. Do you want to kind of
Sure.
give us a high level version?
Yeah, we could start. If you think about it overall, there's a physical impairment categories and visual impairment categories. Um, the visual impairment categories are three different B categories: B1, 2, and 3. The lower the number in paraclimbing categories, the more the severe the impairments per category. So B1 is the most severely visually affected competitors. Nuance to that is they equal the playing field in competition by, if you are a B1 competitor, you do wear blindfolds so that they can ensure that everyone is completely without sight. And then B2 is a little less impaired, and B3 is less impaired as well as that. There are minimums to classification, and they go through that. On the physical side of things, we have classifications for a range of power classification, which is, we call it RP. It's range of power and mobility. So a lot of times it's people maybe suffering with spinal bifida. There's a large range of impairments in this category, so I don't want to necessarily say it's these couple, but cerebral palsy, things like that. And those range of power classifications are also 1, 2, and 3. 3 being the least severe, 1 being the most severe, and 2 right there in the middle. And then we have amputee categories, which are physical impairments as well. Upper extremity amputees and lower extremity amputees. Within the upper extremity amputees, there is only 2 classifications, although the numbers don't make a lot of sense. If we go 1, 2, and 3 before, we no longer have an AU1, which is amputee upper 1 category, which used to be use of only one arm, or no use of completely shoulder down of one arm. And there was never enough competitors, and it's very hard to compete like that, and we could never open a category for a lot of years. So that class eventually got dismissed. They could never open it, and it was always merged, which we can talk about later, into another category. But then we have AU2, which is amputee upper partial arm. So generally they have an elbow, an articulation elbow, and they have an amputation below the elbow. And then amputation upper extremity 3 would mean that they have a wrist and a hand, and some kind of hand or articulable wrist. And the minimum, I don't know the minimums to get in all the categories, the longer, and they change all the time. And there's this relationship between classifiers, which we can get into that too, and route setters knowing all the impairments. But an example of an AU3 category is, a minimum example would be somebody with, you have to have six joints affected on one hand. Or you can have 6 joints across 2 hands. But it's a total of 6 joints. Of course, a lot of people are that's like a minimum number, and just an example of that class that I've been told by one of the classifiers. And it ranges up from there. Like I said, on the physical side, we also have lower extremity amputees, and we have lower extremity amputee 1 and lower extremity amputee 2. Lower extremity amputee 1 means that they have no use of either legs. Usually we used to call it seated. It's generally people that have no use of either leg, or limited use of either leg, or there's a World Cup competitor, Pavitra, who has no limbs. So very talented as well. And amputee lower classification 2 would mean that you have use of one leg, could be right or left, and there is no stipulation about the length of that, like there is with the upper extremity amputee. There is no below the knee, above the knee kind of classification for that category. With that, I can talk and say, when you think of prosthesis, right? There is a rule that says that they cannot use an upper extremity amputees cannot use prosthesis while they are competing. Lower extremity amputees have the ability to, but they don't have to. So they can, but they don't have to. So, which is the interesting thing in the AL2 class that I was just talking about, because we have an amputee left side who uses a different prosthesis and maybe even a different length than their other able-bodied leg, their residual limb. And so, or some people use a shorter limb, which from a climbing and a route setting standpoint, like it definitely makes you think outside the box.
So one thing you mentioned that I kind of want to circle back to is you keep mentioning the term classifier or classification. And so um, the individuals who want to compete in the para world for climbing have to be assessed in some capacity to like be put in one of these categories. Can you speak a little bit to that process?
Yes, so like I said, there are minimums and maximums to each class that you can get in each sporting class. There are 10 total sporting classes that you can enter into. Athletes are medically assessed. They bring their own paperwork in with them. They have medical history and things like that. Prior to the competition, usually the day prior or sometimes 2 days prior, depending on the size of the competition, they go into a medical classification at the event venue or in the location. So say it's Innsbruck, a lot of times there's classification in Innsbruck. So they'll show up 2 days early, go into the classification. They'll meet with a medical doctor. There's usually 3 people on the panel, on this classifying panel, a medical doctor, a climbing professional, and man, I'm drawing a blank on the third one. They're very not. I think it's admin something, but or two medical professionals. I can look it up, but it's very fair. And they are not reclassified. They're reassessed at that time to see if their impairment has gotten worse or their impairment has improved, thus reclassifying them. Maybe they're usually happens in the RP category, the range of power and motion, in which they're moving categories. Some people's impairments get worse, and so that for fairness, they would classify them in the more impaired category. Sometimes they get better, and this is not so fun for the athletes sometimes. I mean, it is fun. It's good to see people getting more healthy and better and like having their his impairment improve, but it's stressful for them because they may get bumped into a category in which they haven't competed before, So it's a stressful time, the classification process for the athletes. So, and it's understandable. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for like the summary. A lot of this is like fairly new information to me. I knew there had been like basically a reorganization of the different classifications. The last time I did anything with para, I was back with all of the old categories, and so I was really excited to hear like more in depth about the different categories now. So I guess I'm really interested in like looking at kind of a high level perspective on the different disciplines and how this affects different categories. Like, looking at different belay systems and the transition to like how that affects you as a route setter as you're setting for these categories in various disciplines.
Well, in the discipline that we're competing in, is paraclimbing is usually always done on top rope. Being is that some of the impairments that people have, it's very difficult to clip if you're on lead, or some of the impairments that people have don't allow them to take a fall, such as in bouldering. And so the top rope is a much safer environment. With the top rope system, a lot of times it's just a single top rope unless there's an overhang, and then we use what we call a double rope system. And it's not too hard to explain, but it's simply a lower top rope on, let's say, the third bolt. That's the middle of the rope. Or if you think of 2 ropes, you have a lower top rope and an upper top rope. And the lower top rope only stops a huge pendulum should the climber fall low on the route on the top rope. So once they pass the first top rope, then essentially they're on top rope again. See how many times I can say top rope in one sentence.
I remember the first time I saw or worked with that system, and I was like, "Oh, this is super cool," and it makes so much sense because it like allows for that community to experience top roping in a less like a less risk way, especially in like those super steep angles.
Yeah, it allows us as route setters to be able to put them on top rope on a steep angle, which
Yeah.
all of these athletes can achieve, and most of them prefer a steep angle. So,
Do you find that having the double top rope um, set up causes any conflict in the route setting process?
no, not really. I would say if it's strategically placed, and that's the important part of it too, is placing your secondary anchor, the whole top, the double rope system, placing that prior to setting the route, just like you would if you were setting a top rope for a C, and you're going to hang the line and make sure the rope doesn't drag. You kind of do the same thing, but just with the double rope system. And yeah, generally we always like to set it up also to where it doesn't really affect the climber, because after they pass the first top rope, you're essentially dragging the lead rope up with you. And so we want to make sure that it's in an area that's like it doesn't hinder them while climbing as well. They're not stepping on it and things like that, or it doesn't get caught through something. So, but the process is the same as you would if you're route setting for a regular top rope.
I feel like that question just like transitions us really perfectly to route setting. I remember, so Noel, you and I had an opportunity to set para nationals, and I don't even remember what year it was, but it's like 2015 or 2017 or something like that. And that was before all these classification changes. And I remember setting a seated route, and I put a whole bunch of like giant ledges, and effectively I watched the competitors like campus in like this big snake format. And then there was like strategic rests where they could sit down and kind of like hang out. Um, and I remember that experience blowing my mind because like at the time I thought, I was like, oh, I've been route setting for, 10, 15 years, whatever it's been. Like I've got a handle on this. And then I walked into that and I was just like, I have no idea how to set for this community. And it was almost like I was back to square zero. So I wonder how many people who are also listening here would have a similar mentality or a similar experience if they're like sort of thrown into an event like that. I would love to talk about how you approach route setting for people in the para world, how it might be different. And I don't know, maybe we could just nerd out about that a little bit.
Absolutely, absolutely. I like nerding out about the route setting process, which the process, if you're a route setter, your process is the same. We're putting holds on the wall. We're designing something that people use the climbing techniques that they've learned and they can make their way through it. When we're setting for competition, of course, we're trying to divide a field, but we're trying to challenge them in inventive ways. When we try to challenge them in inventive ways, we know their limitations. It sounds like I'm talking about youth D or youth C or youth B even, or U13 now, but tells you how old I am. But it is the same. We know the category's limitations. Not only there are some lower limitations and the upper side of the limitation of the category. And so certainly when we know that about any other category, as route setters being creative, we're like, okay, well, how do we challenge within those limitations? Right? Immediately. It's like, how do I make this group of people do this? And then you have to ask, are they capable of doing it? We do it, let's say, big back muscles for prepubescent children. We talk about that all the time, right? And so we would say, oh, well, that move probably isn't appropriate, right? But then you come up with a move that everyone's seen, and maybe it's a showy thing and everything like that, and it's totally appropriate, right? And so you place that in the route or place that in wherever you need it to be and continue to refine it until it's appropriate for the category, or we've all been where it's just not working and it's not appropriate and we've shot over our head a bit and we go back to something more dialed down. But like I said, the process is the same. And when you think about challenging them, I use the same thought process when I think about different groups of people. We're so used to doing it with youth, but all we're doing it now is with para, right? And so even here, we could probably think of a fun way. What we say a lot of times is we're challenging the athlete and their athletic ability. We're not challenging their impairment, which is a huge difference, right? And what that means is we're not asking the prepubescent child with no big back muscles to do a big back muscle move to see who has the biggest back muscles. So we don't do the same thing with impaired athletes. Let's say we try to avoid, but of course, with route setting, athletes are athletes and everybody wants to be pushed, right? To do the next hardest thing. What is considered hard for this group of people, and how do we push them? One of the limitations right now, or the things that are being pushed, right? This is one of the things that I thought was important to talk about too, is like, how do you challenge or how do you push para athletes, right? Because in competition, that's what they're doing. They're competing against each other to see who can push themselves a little bit more and a little bit harder than the other person. And so you have to, for the sake of competition, for the sake of sporting, we really, especially at the world level, and we're doing it at USA Climbing on the national level, there's really been a big push in the last 5 years to make paraclimbing routes look exactly like able-bodied routes, so that no one likes someone walking up the bottom of a route and being able to read the route from the bottom of the route, right? And there's no mystery to the route or anything like that. It's not a competition route. Same in para. The athletes are very skilled climbers. A lot of them have backstories. Some of them were skilled climbers and had an accident. They're still skilled climbers. They just don't climb at the same level that they did before. They still have all the knowledge of climbing. And so when we talk about how do I challenge this person that's been climbing 15 years, the route reading skills is surely going to, like, they have those, you know. And if they keep up with this modern movement, then that's where we're ultimately challenging them, just like we're challenging able-bodied people with modern movement, because they're all capable of the standard 17 movements that we use in rock climbing, you know. And then we started getting all these strange techniques, or these coordinated techniques that we're using now, and now we're trying to push that into that, and they're showing us that they can.
So I want to like do a little bit of a rewind. Like I'm
Sorry.
having this conversation. No, it's amazing. I'm like sitting back and listening because this is an area that I am like very unfamiliar with. So I'm just kind of like enjoying being a part of the audience and just like learning a whole bunch of stuff. And so I think my thought process is I know as a route setter where I need to go in order to learn how to set for like USAC competitions. You go do the clinics, you do your internships, you do this, you do that. Where, one, how does the USAC certification program interact with the para world, if it does? And then two, if it doesn't, where can people start? Like where do you start to like actually learn more about this? Because I live in this like fairly commercial, commercial and then occasional like competition world that's all youth competitions. And without seeking it out, I don't get a lot of information about paraclimbing. So where can people like find it who are interested?
You can find information through or let's say adaptive sports organizations, right? Because we talked about the difference in para and adaptive, or how that term is used. And it's kind of used interchangeably as well. There's a lot of adaptive organizations that hold competitions. So, but you can look, there's a company called Paradox Sports that has information. Catalyst Sports has information, but about para athletes. If you want to get information about para route setting, it is very hard to find. There's maybe a handful of people let's say a dozen people in the United States who are very versed in it. Right now, myself and Aaron Davis do have been doing private clinics for the last couple of years, route setting clinics along with the competition for some of these sports organizations. Recently, USA Climbing, we've had Aaron just did one and I did one in. We just had the first USAC para route setting clinics, certified para route setting clinics, one last year and one just recently at the beginning of this year. And so those were the first two. The curriculum is the same essentially uh, as far as clinics, but I would say if you reach out to the adaptive organizations as well, they can steer you towards the things when the climbing is happening as well, because they know when the climbing is happening, whether it's sanctioned or non-sanctioned, and so like we're talking about sanctioned competitions, but we can also talk about just supporting your adaptive athletes in your gym, and para athletes in your gym. And if you know how to route set for them, uh, then sky's the limit. Then you ask them, how would you like me to challenge you? Just like if anybody here is a commercial route setter, which we've all have been at one point in time, you know, people in your gym climb a certain way and a certain level. And you're like, oh, I'm gonna set this and this person's gonna like it and this person's gonna be challenged on it or not like it. And so like you could do that in your gym again with your para ability or your para community if you know how to set for them originally and who they are. But again, like with the USA climbing certification process, one of the things that we say, how do you set for kids? You have to know the field. You have to know who you're setting for, right? And so we can give a lot of information, and Justin can speak to this too, because me and Justin, when I set my first para event, I think was the first time you had set that para event as well. And as soon as you see it, as soon as you see paraclimbers climbing, it snaps for you. A lot of people have a light bulb moment at that point. And it's not just watching them like route setters, it's watching them on something that you have experience on. Oh, I've climbed on that. Oh, I understand that. Oh, yeah, that was a reach for me. So the limitation of an AU competitor who has a shorter wingspan, I could see how I messed up, and now that reach is too long for an AU2 competitor, and how I've made this route unfair or unachievable. So like I said, there's a lot of classifications to para, and there aren't a lot of para climbers. So if I was a route setter in your gym, I would hone in on, you may only have one lower extremity amputee climber and one RP2 climber or range of power 2 climber. And so like just understanding them would be a really great start. When we give clinics that generally last 4 days, we tell people that if you come out of this with knowledge of 6 of the 10 classes, then you're doing really well, because it is a lot to digest. But I think that the people who've been through, let's say, a competition system or a route setting system that takes different groups of people into consideration, paraclimbing is for you as well. That's all I'm doing, is I'm setting a challenge and I'm taking different groups of people into consideration. And of course, like everyone else, I want to divide the field and I want to challenge the best.
Yeah, so something you just said just prompted me to think of this. Like we've got a note in our prep doc of the if you build it, will they come? So talking about like you may only have, one athlete from a couple of different categories in your gym, but from your experience, if you're building a fairly inclusive route setting, if you show yourself to be open to setting for the para field, can you start to build more of a program in your area? And then like you mentioned a couple of organizations, but thinking about like how can you start to interact with like local organizations, and if this is something that you and your local community are interested in building, how do you go about doing that? Great
There's
question.
another organization I thought about. If you're thinking of like local organizations, and if you build it, will they come? Essentially, this is like how Para got so big as well. Um, it's huge, especially on the international level too. Is para athletes a lot of times are para athletes, and so they're athletes, and they're athletes maybe in canoeing or something like that, and they try climbing because they're athletic as well. And so then they're like, oh, well, I'm a multi-sport athlete and now I'm into climbing and I'm a paraclimber now. That's generally, from my experience, where paraclimbers come from, or they're already climbers and they've had an accident or, some kind of impairment, But I would say that, yes, if you build it, they will come. One of the organizations you can reach out to is like Wounded Warrior. That's a great, and they're all over the country, a lot of people with impairments and amputations and things like that. And I do, if you build it, will they come? This is one of the things I wanted to touch on too, for any gym owner or any head route setter listening to this webinar. If you practice building a very accessible route for an upper extremity amputee climber in the 5'10" to 5'11" range, which is achievable, even in the 5'9" range, generally, it turns out to be a very, very, very fun commercial route as well. Because in this process, the route setters are doing everything that they can to challenge while add inclusivity or accessibility, let's say that, And so from my experience, even if you build it and no one comes, it's still a banger.
I love that.
Or a couple people come,
I wanted to jump in because I think you just listed a couple of great organizations. I've had the privilege of working with some people with the Wounded Warriors. Sorry, Outdoors for All is another one that I've had experience with. And so, these people exist in the community, and I think doing some outreach, maybe organizing an adaptive night at your gym or something like that, where you can I don't know, give them a discount on their day pass and just bring them in and show them the ropes, literally. And then, some people might be like, well, that was fun, I'm not doing that again. But you might get some people that stick. And I think that might be a starting point, a launch point. And if they come in and you have built something that gives them success, they're much more likely to come back. And then if they become a member, and then you connect with them and ask them questions and learn about what to do, and you're going to fail and you're going to succeed, and you're going to think they can do this, and then they won't be able to, or maybe they can if they work towards it. And then eventually maybe there's enough of those individuals that you can build a team. There are organizations across the country, that gyms that have adaptive programming, where it becomes a competitive team. I was in New England, and there was an adaptive program that turned into a para team. And I think these things can cascade, just like little dominoes. And all it takes is that initial approach, and usually someone who buys in, who's psyched, who kind of pokes and says, "Hey, I would love to train. What do you think about that?" And then fast forward, a year or 2 years or however long it takes, then maybe you have a full-blown program. And the route setting team just learns along the way, because we're not going to get it at first. And I think Noel's absolutely right. As soon as you start to look through that lens, because I remember when you and I did that event, Noel, it was a long time ago, but I remember asking the question of okay, well, if we have an upper extremity amputee, one person has this happened on their left side and this person has something on their right side, how do we balance that route setting decision? And the forerunning process was really interesting to me, because we were trying to ask a lot of these questions, and it really, like you said, didn't click until I watched it. I was like, oh, I experienced that route, and then I watched them on it, and oh, I know so much more now.
Yeah. I could say I remember those routes or those forerunning experiences as well. And the forerunnings come for myself has come a long way since then. And this is just because of the knowledge of the field, you know, and seeing it so many times. But yeah, definitely, I would say that if you build it, I think that you should build it, and they will come. I think it's always a great group of people to support. So
And it seems like there's no downside in the building of it. So
yeah, well, I touched before about making how do we make like let's say para routes look like able-bodied routes, you know? How do we make para competitors climb the exact same way as the able-bodied competitors or do the exact same moves, right? Or even what Justin said is how do you set for fairly for someone missing a left arm versus someone missing a right arm, right? Because we all know that is climbing can be side dependent as well, right? Para athletes are some of the most resourceful athletes, some of the most resourceful climbers I've ever seen. The way they find beta that works for them, the way they use their own body to essentially defy gravity or find balance, is it may be not standard, but works perfect, which is amazing. I'll touch on when I said the difference in a prosthesis category for lower extremity amputee, you do or do not have to wear one, and it can be any length. The ability to have a knee length leg and just smear flat footed on the wall totally escaped my mind for the first 2 years, really, that I had route set until I saw an athlete with a shoe at the end of a half length leg and how they used that leg allowed them to get in body positions that I had never seen before. And it was amazing. And then, so that opened my eye up just to that one small category, you know, with the upper extremity amputee category. A lot of times, the athlete will lead with the residual limb, with the hand that they do have, even if it means matching and coming back. It may be for a security situation or something like that. Maybe they don't know the hold they're going to. But the first couple times I saw that, I was like, oh no, why would you do? Oh, okay, because it's making sense because they're making it work. That's how they're climbing. So I don't know where I was going with that tangent, but so we also ask how do we challenge them, you know? And I would say some of the things that we're trying to test with the visually impaired is full on, yeah, all points off dyno, right? Like how cool would that be, you know, to get the top athletes in the world to be able to jump to an unknown position and have the fast twitch muscles that are fast enough and the reaction time and the technique to be able to then double hands down, grab a dyno and hold on to it. We've come very, very close, you know, and things like that are very impressive because you see the athletes working. You see them working just as hard as every other athlete, and their impairment is not holding them back. Let's say one of the ways that I particularly like to even the playing field and talk about for visually impaired competitors is a nice shadow walk. If I ever get the opportunity to have a no hands shadow walk across a slab or something like that, because like, yeah, we use our visual acuity for balance as well, but we could do it with our eyes closed. You know, when we're using our balance, we're using, you know, our inner ears and we're using our proprioceptive, you know, how we feel on our feet and things like that. So it does even the playing field a lot. And that's like, that shows like what athletes have been preparing themselves in all the techniques, you know, because you can see that some athletes are very, very good at certain styles, just like every other mode of competition, and they lean into that hard. And so when we route set and we think about a very fair route, we try to challenge all the styles. And of course, we're like, this person is probably going to have a hard time here, you know, because they historically have not done well with this type of challenge. So,
Yeah, I'm just so excited. I really enjoy like listening to you chat about this because again, it's things that I have so little experience with, and so it's like really exciting for me to like imagine like again that all points off dyno or like as again the shadow walk is just like things that I had never considered before. So thank you. It's like
Yeah.
I really like coming into these conversations knowing so little. I should do this more often of being like, I have no idea what we're talking about. I'm just like here to enjoy. It's perfect.
Really appreciate kind of like the way you're speaking about this because you're kind of like making it just it the route setting is the philosophy of route setting for the para community is the same as setting for any other community, right? It's how we do it functionally is the same. We are figuring out what they can and cannot do and putting test pieces on the wall and then seeing if they can or can't do. And I love that framework because I think when I went into this for the first time a while ago, that's not the frame of reference I thought. I don't know even what I was thinking, but it wasn't that. So I really appreciate you kind of putting it in that context.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for reframing that as well. Yep. Because that is what I want people to know about para route setting is that it is just like every other community that you can serve in your gym. It's not this mysterious. It's just for me, when I started setting for youth, I was let's say 28 years old. I didn't have children yet, right? And I was a newer climber, but I was setting for youth as well. And so here I am, like, I really didn't know about 11-year-old children, right? Like, it wasn't until I became a father that I started realizing or set for a long time for 11-year-old children, and I think it's the same for para is that you're not going to go into it knowing, oh, I took this clinic and I know how to set for para, so I'm a para setter. You have to go set for people who need you to set for them that have limitations, whatever that be. And then if they want to be a competitor or get better at climbing, you have to learn how to achievably push that limitation for them.
So I see that in some ways as a double-edged sword because on one hand you need exposure, right? Any of us who are regularly commercially route setting in a gym or setting for competitions, we can go to one of those things, like whether it be me popping down to the gym at 7 p.m. and just like having a casual conversation with the crew about like how this 5'7" or how this 5'12" or whatever. But if you're in a space that doesn't have that community, like that para community or that adaptive community, it makes it a lot harder because you don't have that test phase. You don't have that observation opportunity. You don't get to ask those questions. And so I think figuring out how to solve for that can be hard. And I think in this ideal world, you have at least one or two of these people in your community that you can kind of like chat with, and they're open to having those conversations with you. But can you kind of maybe speak to let's say someone who has no para experience, who might have a harder time, there isn't like a person that they could learn from in their space, but they want to get more involved. What do they do? How do they start?
I would say it's kind of keep your ear open to the websites and to Instagram and things like that, and start following USA Paraclimbing. Start following those sanctioned organizations, see who's following them, and trickle down, and then you'll get the information coming up. You touched on something too about like the exposure to it, right? However, when you're setting for the youth, if you haven't been climbing with youth a lot, you don't have a lot of exposure to it, right? But you still forerun, right?
Sure.
And you still have some kind of testing that can be done. And so even if you don't have a blind athlete, guess who can wear a blindfold? Anyone, right? And so even if you set something that you're like, look, I want to set something that is climbable by a blind person, you can set a route that is achievable level. And along with a collar, which we can get into later and all that stuff, is very hard. The collar athlete in a visual impairment situation is a very important relationship because they're guiding the caller and they can, you know, have success or not have success based off the beta that they're giving them. But when you're forerunning, you can even do it while you're forerunning, you know. Let's talk about easy ways to route set because of what we know about the limitations. Blind, we talked about going dynamic to things for blind is like the most challenging thing ever. It's like almost impossible. You can't see where you're going. So scale that back to the smallest, like thrutchy move. Like we try to dial out thrutchy moves for blind climbers. Why? Because you can't thrutch, you can't, you know, snatch something. I mentioned stacks. We also stack AU to competitors with blind competitors a lot of times because of reach issues with AU2, right? If you can't reach, if you're at your max extension, well, a blind competitor with both limbs, usually the length of the move is not going to be a thrutchy or a reachy move. And so those two categories kind of line up to each other when you talk about the style of route in which you're setting, right? Things that you may want to avoid, right? But then when we go back and we forerun, when we stack them, we also go, we challenge in a section and we go, okay, is this challenge appropriate for this category, and this category? And that's kind of challenging in itself. But so your exposure can be just that. Also, when we forerun, let's say, lower extremity amputee, because there is no rule that says they have to wear a prosthesis, we assume that they have no limb. So we forerun with one limb, right? And we don't use. So I say, okay, I'm going to climb with only a left leg. And anyone can do that. And then we check sides, essentially, right? How do we make it fair? Well, okay, I climb only left leg, and then I climb only right leg. And I'm like, wow, that move up there, because it's sides specific, is really hard if you're missing a right, and not so hard if you're missing a left. We need to do something about that. And adding the foot is not always the answer. Well, maybe adding the foot for the other side, right? Well, it may be the answer commercially. It's generally not the answer in competition because we're not trying to make people do the exact same beta. We're trying to get them to climb through it at the same level. A lot of times they use the same beta, but we surely don't want them doing whatever they want. You know, not choose your own adventure. That's not competition climbing. But we know that they may use one or two techniques. If you're missing a left leg in this scenario, you're going to kick the foot over there. You're going to backstep this. You're going to go up right hand, right? If you're missing it, if you're missing the other leg, that's the only foot option. You kick this foot up there, you're going to go left hand first. Oh, do we care if they go left hand or right hand first in this one move? No, we'd rather have one foot option so that it doesn't change and so on and so forth. That's further into the process of making it fair or equitable for both sides. But back to the exposure thing, these are techniques that without a paraclimber, people can practice.
No, that makes perfect sense, and I appreciate that. You mentioned quickly the caller. I think maybe I would love just for anyone on the call who has not experienced that visual category. Can you explain like what that looks like and how does that work?
Yeah, so in the visually impaired category, there's a team member, which is a caller, and the caller is telling the athlete, giving the athlete instruction or beta on how to climb the route in real time. In competition, in an on-site format, if they would go out there and in finals, the caller goes out there with the athlete so that the caller can preview the route. And then the caller is essentially as well telling the athlete what to do as they're climbing. There are very polished teams. There are very not so polished teams when it comes to communication. It's a very hard thing to do if you try to give someone beta move for move without saying without a bunch of filler words, clearly and concisely saying what you need to say and get them to do what they need to do. Also reading the route, because there's some callers that may not be even as experienced or as good as the climber. And so sometimes like we see that the climber is struggling to find the way because the caller is maybe not reading the route correctly. And so they may have a moment where they pause and they talk through it and they find a way through it together. But yeah, it's a very, very interesting relationship. It has to be practiced. They have a lot of techniques that they use in between each other. There's, some of the best in the world have been working together since they're, for 13 plus years, climbing with one caller, one climber. So the caller really knows the climber as well. They know how they climb. They know how they like to climb. Oh, this person's really good, like getting their feet out in front of them. When they're on a route, they love their feet out in front of them, right? And so I think that a caller that can read their athlete really well does a good job as well. But yeah, the caller is, in a visual impairment situation, a very important part of the athletic experience for sure.
I'm just thinking about that. Like if I were in that role, I feel like I would be terrible at it. Uh, and just thinking about it, it's like, oh man, like you really do have to know how the athlete moves and how, like what they're going to do, because you're not route reading for yourself. You're route reading for another body that might do something different than you would. That's super interesting to me.
It's also interesting from a different side of it, being a route setter or being somebody who watches people climb. Like I can analyze their body positions and body language as well while they're on a move. So like for a caller to be able to do that as well, and oh, this person is struggling here, let me find a new way, or this person is struggling here, but this is the way you do it. So you got to do it, It's also a different dynamic for the caller to think about. Are they struggling? Am I telling them the wrong beta, or is this the way you have to do the route?
That makes me think of something. I have a clarifying question. Is this a two-way conversation, or is this a one-way where you only get information
It
as
is
the
a
climber?
two-way conversation.
Okay.
It can be a one-way conversation, but recently they've all moved towards wearing headsets. So they have a headset and they have a remote device strapped to them, and the caller has the same thing. So the caller doesn't have to verbally yell up at the climber, which is how they used to do it. And some people still prefer that, but it doesn't allow for too much communication back from the climber down to the ground. With a headset, it's two-way and it's better communicated that way. Plus, with that, in a competition aspect, go ahead, Cameron.
When you're setting for this caller and climber scenario, are you looking to challenge like them as a team, or are you really focusing on challenging the climber and leaving it as kind of doable or as easy as possible for the caller?
So we're definitely challenging the climber and not the caller.
Okay.
The caller, just like everybody, you get a route map, you get a visual presentation, you get a demonstration video, we tell the caller exactly what is intended for them to do. Where the callers are being tested is in their communication technique and also their memorization of what's supposed to be done. Because again, I've seen, and so we are testing the athlete 100%. I'm going to build a visually impaired athlete or blind route for this athlete who I know is a 512 climber and loves crimps, and I'm going to put a banger on the wall and they're going to be able to do it. I would say where the caller is then challenged is, their communication and their memorization as well, which that's on them. That's not me trying to get them not to memorize something. So in fact, it's quite the opposite. I want them to remember because I don't want the athlete to be hindered by something else.
Yeah, like the external force that yeah. Then you're not testing the actual athlete who's competing. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, we've had scenarios where we have this really cool move up here and we expect two people to get there and they're both going to show the crowd how it's done. And then there's a move before that the callers just didn't even read and we didn't get anyone to that point. And we were like kind of bummed about it, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that's the dynamic too, right? It's like lots of things to consider, but those things are just for that category to consider, you know? And when you just break it down into the different categories and different considerations, paraclimbing is para route setting is very much like every other route setting I've done. It's just I used to say it's very cerebral, and it is like, you know, like depending on your climbing level, like maybe you're not trying as hard, you know, and it's not about whether it's hard or not. It's about whether the move is appropriate and whether these people with these impairments can manipulate their body in a way that can get them through this challenge, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes perfect sense. I really appreciate how you've demystified in a lot of ways, where I think it's very easy for a lot of route setters like myself who have like a fair amount of experience with the youth field to be like, I don't know anything about para. Even though like I've set a couple of like at the time it was like an adaptive QE or I don't even remember, it was like 8 years ago. But it still feels very foreign, and I think you did a really nice job of uh comparing it to very familiar things and making it feel less intimidating for somebody like myself who'd like, well, I don't know anything. So thank you so much. I want to check back in and just see if there's like anything that we didn't get to that you wanted to emphasize. Um, yeah, it looks like, did Kimball drop out? Yeah. Um, yeah, did we miss
Yeah,
anything?
no,
Any questions that we should have asked you that we didn't?
I mean, this is a topic we could definitely speak for a long time on, especially myself. But no, I think we touched on a lot of things. I mean, it's a whole community of people that climb and can be route set for. So, and it's no mystery. If you're a route setter, you're probably creative and you could be creative in another fashion.
Well,
So,
and empathy is empathy, right? Like,
absolutely.
I know nothing about being a 10-year-old boy. So,
I said the same thing to someone else, not, yeah, the opposite way. But yeah, yeah.
yeah. Well, we try to keep an eye out for, I know I've sent a few para events or clinics your way, Scott. We'll try to keep up on those and make sure that if anything comes up, Noel, if you have anything that you're teaching in the future, let us know because
Great.
it's good stuff.
One, I was going to say one thing that I'm actually in some conversations with USAC about, like the camp that you were just talking about. The like, it's like a 3-pack event. It's like a qualifying event, a training camp, and like a clinic for the athletes. Like USAC is looking for host gyms to do these all over the country. And if you're
Mhm.
interested, that is a great opportunity, and you can start those conversations if your facility is in an area. Or your facility is like a good match for that kind of thing, like reach out. I'm sure that they would be interested in having a conversation, or look at any of the adaptive or para, like unsanctioned. I don't know if that's the right term, but like non-USAC things. Um, like connect with the route setters over there, and maybe you can travel to one of those, or maybe they're nearby. I'm sure that there's options.
Cool. Well, I think that's it,
Yeah,
guys. Did we do it?
I think so.
I think
Yeah.
so.
Thanks for being on, Noel. That's
Thank
cool.
you
Yeah,
so
thank
much,
you.
Noel.
Thank you.
It's so much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
appreciate
if
all.
anytime.